The purpose of the Climate Change Accountability Act is simple: to make our government accountable to Canadians on achieving real reductions in greenhouse gases. Just as important, it makes clear to the world that we in Canada are willing to do our part to prevent a catastrophic rise in average global temperatures. This act is based on pure science, clear science. It provides for the bare minimum required to save us from disaster. Many scientists say we need to do even more. Let's review what other jurisdictions have done and their plans for future reductions. Canadian cities got the ball rolling in Canada. 20 years ago, Toronto made a commitment to reduce CO2 emissions. Today, Toronto, unlike Canada at large, has reduced emissions despite enormous population growth. In fact, all of Canada's big city mayors have committed to take actions even more ambitious than those in this bill. Mr. Speaker, let's look at what some provinces have done. BC, Manitoba, Ontario, and Quebec have already joined the Western Climate Initiative, which includes most Western American states as well. This initiative to control greenhouse gases will be taken up by those provinces and states because of the leadership vacuum of the Bush administration and our federal governments. The provinces knew that they had to act, even if our federal governments have failed to. Most of the public also know that real action must be taken. Opinion polls keep saying again and again that 4 out of 5 Canadians favor strict measures to reduce emissions. So most people and governments have begun to take action in spite of more than a decade of federal government inaction. Let's look at the role that other national governments are taking. European leadership has long been apparent, and Obama will be moving quickly in the United States. In island nations like the Maldives, it's a matter of survival. They have legislated carbon neutrality within a decade. It's equally important for Kiribati, which will soon disappear beneath the waves because of melting ice caps. They're going carbon neutral and praying that the rest of the world fulfills our obligations too, or be the first to lose their countries. Our government's own scientists are warning of increased frequency of extreme weather, floods, fires, drought, and severe storms. Implementing the targets in this bill is not just an ecological imperative, it's also an economic necessity. Former World Bank chief economist Nicholas Stern concluded that not adopting serious reduction targets now will, in the end, actually cost us much more, perhaps more than any of us can think of affording. In Canada, the recent Jacquard and Associates report shows that the cost of adopting these targets here will be quite minimal. Canada's economy will still grow at 2% and create over 1 million net new jobs. But we don't need studies to tell us this. We just have to look at the real-life examples in Europe, in forward-looking countries like Germany and Denmark, who have transformed their economies and stimulated growth in new industries. So we can afford to adopt these targets. We can't afford not to. Mr. Speaker, a national climate change policy is the responsibility of the federal government. It's time to assume our responsibilities. This act gives our government a way to work towards what cities, provinces, and Canadians say we are ready to do, what we are all compelled to do. Just 2 weeks ago, the International Scientific Congress preparing for Copenhagen painted a stark picture. Researchers say our worst-case climate scenarios are increasingly likely of coming true. Melting ice sheets, rising sea levels, acidification of entire oceans, and social and economic chaos on a global scale. Mr. Speaker, Canada's Parliament passed this act last year. It sets orderly targets for the next 40 years. It forces the government to publish a plan to achieve those targets. Mr. Dion and the Liberals voted for this act last year. It didn't clear the Senate law when an election was called early, but the problem has not gone away. In fact, it's clear that it's getting worse, and worse, faster and faster. This December, world leaders will meet in Copenhagen to sign a new agreement to avoid dangerous climate change. will we be embarrassed yet again on the world stage?